The appointment was fine. The doctor was fine. You drove home, pulled into the driveway, and sat there for a minute before going inside. Not because anything was wrong. Because nothing felt particularly right either. Because somewhere between the waiting room and the parking lot, the thought came again, the one that keeps coming, that there has to be something you can do, something in your own hands, something that does not require a copay or a referral or a follow-up in 6 weeks. Here is what that thought is telling you. It is right, because right now, in June, while the soil is warm and the growing window is wide open, there are 7 plants you can put in the ground that researchers at universities and medical institutions across the world are actively studying. Not because they are exotic, not because they are expensive, because they work. And science is only now catching up to what people who grew their own food always understood. These are not the plants you have already seen on this channel. These are 7 that most backyard gardeners have never considered. Plants that quietly sit at the intersection of traditional knowledge and modern clinical research, doing incredible things inside the human body that scientists spent decades trying to fully map out. Before we get into them, if you are managing a health condition or taking prescription medication, talk to your doctor before introducing any of these functional plants to your diet. I will flag every known interaction as we go. That is not a disclaimer. That is respect for what you are actually dealing with. Plant 1, moringa, somewhere in the world right now. Moringa is being called a miracle tree. Scientists are calling it something more precise. One of the most nutrient-dense plants ever formally analyzed. Both descriptions are pointing at the exact same thing. Moringa oleifera is a fast-growing tree that in warm climates reaches 20 feet in a single season. In USDA zones 9 through 11, it grows as a perennial that can be cut back hard each year and harvested continuously. In zones 7 and 8, it dies back to the ground in winter and returns from the root in spring. In colder zones, 6 and below, grow it in a large container and bring it inside before frost. It is one of the fastest growing plants you can cultivate in a container, and it produces harvestable leaves within weeks of transplanting. What researchers have found inside those leaves is difficult to summarize without sounding like exaggeration, which is why it helps to let the numbers speak, gram for gram. Moringa leaves contain more vitamin C than oranges, more calcium than milk, more potassium than bananas, more iron than spinach, and more protein than most plant sources combined. A 2019 review published in Frontiers in Pharmacology examined the clinical research on moringa and documented significant anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, blood sugar moderating, and cholesterol-lowering effects across multiple studies. The tree is not doing one thing. It is doing several things that matter deeply to the aging body, simultaneously, in every single handful of leaves you harvest. In warm zones, plant moringa in the sunniest spot you have, in well-draining soil. It does not want to compete with shade or sit in wet ground. If planting in a container, a 15-gallon pot is ideal. Use a fast-draining potting mix and place it in a south-facing location that gets at least 6 hours of direct sun. In June, now that the last frost has long passed in your zone, this is the perfect moment to plant. It will establish incredibly fast in the warm summer soil, and you will have harvestable leaves within 4 to 6 weeks. Pick individual leaves from the stems, or cut entire young branches and strip the leaves. The younger the leaf, the more tender and mild the flavor. Moringa leaves have a slightly green, mildly peppery taste that disappears almost completely when dried and powdered. Fresh leaves can be stirred into soups at the end of cooking, blended into smoothies, or sautéed lightly with garlic and olive oil. Dried powder, made by spreading fresh leaves on a screen in a shaded, well-ventilated area for 2 weeks and then crumbling them into a fine powder, stores for up to a year in a sealed glass jar and can be stirred into anything. 1 teaspoon of dried moringa powder in warm water each morning is where most people begin. What they discover is that the energy shift is real, and it is measurable, and it happens faster than they expected. The researchers who are finally paying attention to this plant are not surprised. The people who grew it for generations already knew. Plant 2, ginger. Most people know ginger as a flavor, a warming spice in tea, a sharp note in cooking, something that helps with nausea on a rough stomach day. What most people do not know is that fresh ginger root, grown in a pot in your own kitchen or backyard, carries a dynamic compound profile that researchers have been examining seriously for decades for its effects on inflammation, circulation, blood sugar, and systemic comfort. Zingiber officinale is a tropical rhizome that grows beautifully in containers across virtually every American growing zone. It does not want cold. It does not want frost, but it wants very little else beyond warmth. Indirect light, consistent moisture, and patience. Plant a fresh, plump rhizome from the grocery store or a garden center in a wide, shallow pot in early summer. The rhizome wants to spread horizontally, not sink deep. Set it in bright, indirect light. Keep the soil consistently moist but never waterlogged, and within a few weeks, green shoots will emerge. By late summer and fall, you will have a root system several times the size of what you planted. The research on ginger's properties centers on compounds called gingerols and shogols. Multiple clinical trials have examined ginger for joint comfort and found meaningful reductions in stiffness scores compared to placebo. A study published in Arthritis and Rheumatism found that a highly concentrated ginger extract significantly supported knee comfort on standing, a finding that replicated across subsequent trials. Research has also examined ginger for its effect on fasting blood glucose, with several trials showing measurable, positive balancing reductions in participants. This is a plant that researchers keep returning to because the results keep holding up. Choose a rhizome with visible growth buds, the small, rounded protrusions on the surface. Break it into pieces, each containing at least one bud. Plant each piece 2 to 3 inches deep in a wide, shallow container with good drainage. Water gently and place in a warm spot with bright, indirect light. Do not overwater in the early weeks before shoots appear. Once growing actively, ginger appreciates consistent moisture and benefits from a slow-release organic fertilizer every 4 to 6 weeks. Ginger can be harvested in 2 ways. For fresh root, wait until the plant is at least 8 months old, typically late fall of its first year, then tip the container and gently extract the rhizome. Use what you need and replant a portion to start the next cycle. For a lighter, continuous harvest, simply reach into the edge of the pot and break off a small piece of root without disturbing the main plant. Fresh ginger root grated into hot water with lemon and raw honey is one of the most effective and pleasant daily preparations. Add it to soups, stir-fries, smoothies, and rice dishes. Slice it thin and steep it in apple cider vinegar for a warming tonic that keeps for months in the refrigerator. A root you grew in a pot on your porch, a compound that researchers have tested in clinical trials. The distance between those two things is smaller than any supplement company wants you to believe. Plant 3. Oregano. If someone told you that a common kitchen herb contained one of the highest antioxidant concentrations ever measured in any plant food on Earth, you might expect it to be rare, expensive, or difficult to grow. Oregano is none of those things. Oreganum vulgare is a hardy perennial in USDA zones 4 through 10. It grows in almost any soil, in full sun with minimal water once established. It spreads steadily, fills gaps in a garden beautifully, and comes back stronger every spring. A single plant purchased for $3 will supply more oregano than most households can use within 2 seasons. And it will go on doing this for years without ever being replanted. The antioxidant measurement that research keeps returning to is oregano's ORAC value, a measure of antioxidant capacity per gram of plant material. Fresh oregano consistently scores among the highest of any food tested, and dried oregano scores even higher, because the drying process concentrates the active compounds. The relevant compounds are primarily rosmarinic acid and carvacrol. Rosmarinic acid has been documented in clinical research for its structural, supportive, and protective properties. Carvacrol has been studied for its effects on harmful microbes, specifically its ability to disrupt bacterial cell membranes, and has shown robust activity against several strains in laboratory research. A 2011 study published in the Journal of Medicinal Food found carvacrol among the most effective natural protective agents tested across a panel of bacterial cultures. For those looking to support long-term immune resilience, This is a plant worth knowing at a much deeper level than most cookbooks cover. Plant oregano in your sunniest, most well-drained spot. Sandy, even rocky soil is completely fine. Oregano evolved in the dry hillsides of the Mediterranean and prefers lean conditions over rich ones. In June, transplant nursery starts 12 to 18 inches apart. Water well at planting and then pull back. Once established, oregano in the right conditions is essentially self-sufficient. Do not fertilize heavily. Rich soil pushes more leaf growth but dilutes the essential oils that carry the true functional value. Lean soil, full sun, and occasional dry spells produce the most potent harvest. Begin harvesting as soon as the plant is actively growing. Snip 4 to 6 inch sprigs just above a leaf node, which encourages the plant to branch and produce more growth. Harvest before the plant flowers for the highest oil concentration. If it does flower, small white to pale pink blooms in midsummer, harvest the flowers too. They are edible and carry the exact same compounds. Dry cut sprigs in a warm, dark location for 7 to 10 days, then crumble leaves from the stems and store in a sealed glass jar. Fresh leaves can be steeped in olive oil for 2 weeks to make a strongly flavored and dynamic infused oil. Use it on everything. The most powerful antioxidant in your garden might be the one you already have growing. You just did not know how powerful it actually was. Plant 4. Thyme. There is a conversation happening in microbiology research right now about natural protective compounds, about what plants have been doing to fight harmful pathogens for thousands of years, and what that means for people trying to maintain their wellness through proactive habits. Thyme is near the center of that conversation. Thymus vulgaris is hardy in USDA zones 4 through 9. It grows as a small, woody, spreading shrub, 6 to 12 inches tall, covered in tiny aromatic leaves and small pink to purple flowers in early summer. Like oregano, it thrives in poor, well-draining soil and full sun. It is drought-tolerant, deer-resistant, and one of the longest-lived herbs in the garden. A well-planted thyme starts producing the season it goes in the ground and will still be producing a decade later with minimal attention. The primary active compound in thyme is thymol, a phenol with extensively documented antimicrobial and protective properties. The European Medicines Agency has formally recognized thyme preparations for support in respiratory tract conditions, based on a substantial body of clinical evidence. Multiple trials have examined thyme-based preparations for seasonal breathing discomfort, coughs, and upper respiratory support, finding consistent improvements in comfort and recovery scores. For anyone whose respiratory resilience is a primary wellness focus, thyme is a plant that bridges the kitchen and the garden in a way very few herbs manage as cleanly. Set thyme plants 12 inches apart in full sun and well-draining soil. Raised beds and rocky slopes are ideal. If your soil is heavy clay, plant in a container, or amend heavily with gravel or coarse sand before planting. In June, nursery transplants establish incredibly fast in the warm summer soil. Water at planting, then back off dramatically. Thyme planted in the right conditions asks almost nothing from you and gives back for years. Snip fresh sprigs throughout the growing season, cutting stems back by no more than 1/3 at a time to keep the plant from becoming too woody. The highest concentration of thymol is just before flowering. If you want the most potent harvest, time your main cutting to that exact moment. Dry sprigs on a screen or hang in bundles in a warm, dark room for 10 days. Strip dried leaves from the stems and store in glass. Fresh thyme steeped in raw honey for 2 weeks makes one of the oldest and most effective natural preparations for respiratory support in the herbal tradition, a preparation that researchers have since examined in clinical trials and found genuinely active. That jar of thyme honey sitting on your kitchen shelf is a documented, peer-reviewed botanical preparation sitting right in your pantry. If this approach to functional gardening is giving you something your lifestyle has been missing, subscribe right now. Hit the bell. Let's keep going. Plant 5. Sage. The conversation about cognitive support and natural compounds has grown significantly in the last decade. And within that conversation, one herb that has been sitting quietly in kitchen gardens for 2,000 years keeps appearing in the research with results that make scientists take a second look. Salvia officinalis, Common garden sage is hardy in Usta zones 4 through 8. It grows as a woody perennial shrub, 12 to 24 inches tall, with soft gray-green, velvety leaves and tall spikes of purple-blue flowers in early summer. The flowers attract bees, hummingbirds, and butterflies in numbers that make the blooming period one of the most visually active moments in the garden. It is drought-tolerant, deer-resistant, extremely long-lived, and one of the most underestimated functional plants in the American home garden. Research published in Pharmacological Biochemistry and Behavior found that participants who received sage extract showed significant improvements in memory recall and attention on cognitive testing compared to placebo. A separate study examining the effect of dried sage leaf extract on mood, memory, and alertness found consistent improvements across all 3 measures. The mechanism researchers point to involves sage's ability to interact with acetylcholinesterase, an enzyme critical to pathways involving memory and learning. This is the exact same pathway targeted by modern science for cognitive maintenance. Sage works on the same natural pathway. From a plant that costs $3 at a garden center, choose a sunny, well-drained spot. Sage planted in heavy, wet soil deteriorates quickly. If drainage is a concern, raise the bed or plant in a container. Set nursery transplants 18 inches apart in June. Water well at planting. Then allow the soil to dry moderately between waterings. Prune lightly after the first flush of growth to encourage bushing. Fresh leaves can be harvested throughout the growing season, beginning in the plant's first year. Snip individual leaves or small sprigs as needed. For drying, harvest the main flush of new growth just before flowering. This is when the essential oil content peaks. Bundle loosely and hang in a warm, dark, well-ventilated space for 10 to 14 days. Dried sage stores well for up to a year in sealed glass. A simple sage tea, 4 or 5 fresh leaves or a teaspoon of dried leaf steeped in hot water for 8 minutes, is one of the oldest preparations in European traditional history, and one that is now supported by a body of clinical research that did not exist 20 years ago. Drink it in the morning, or fry whole leaves briefly in butter and olive oil until crisp and scatter over pasta or roasted vegetables. This preparation concentrates the oils and produces a flavor that is completely different from, and better than, dried sage from a jar. 2,000 years of traditional use, a growing body of cognitive research. A plant so well suited to American gardens that it practically tends itself. That combination does not come along often. Plant 6, Astragalus. Most people in the Western world have never heard of this plant. In traditional Eastern practices, it has been used for over 2,000 years. It appears in classical texts as one of the fundamental tonic herbs, not a remedy for a sudden illness, but a plant used consistently over time to strengthen the body's deep, natural protective energy. Modern immunology has a different vocabulary for the same concept, and the research that has accumulated on astragalus over the last 3 decades is some of the most interesting in botanical science. Astragalus membranaceus is a hardy perennial legume, zones 6 through 9, growing 2 to 4 feet tall with fern-like compound leaves and small yellowish-white flowers in early summer. It fixes nitrogen in the soil, improving the growing conditions for everything around it, and once established, returns reliably each spring without ever being replanted. The clinical research on astragalus focuses primarily on immune modulation, the unique ability of its active compounds, called polysaccharides and saponins, to support the activity of the immune system's frontline defenders. Research published in clinical journals has examined astragalus-based preparations in combination with lifestyle parameters and found significant support for overall immune response and vitality scores. Additional research has examined astragalus for its effect on cellular health parameters, drawing serious scientific attention because of what protective support represents in the biology of aging. Astragalus prefers full sun and well-draining, slightly sandy soil. In June, direct sow scarified seeds, seeds that have been lightly scratched with sandpaper or soaked overnight in warm water to improve germination, 1 inch deep and 12 inches apart. Germination takes 2 to 3 weeks in warm soil. Water consistently through establishment, then reduce. Like most legumes, astragalus improves with minimal interference, let it grow, let it flower, and let it build its root system through the season. The root is the primary functional part and is harvested in fall of the plant's third or fourth year, when the root system has fully developed. This is a plant that rewards patience. Dig carefully, wash the root, and slice into thin pieces the traditional preparation known as root slices, often added directly to soups and broths during cooking and removed before eating. Simmered for 30 to 40 minutes in a bone broth or vegetable soup. Astragalus root slowly releases its polysaccharides into the liquid. Dried root slices store for up to 2 years in sealed glass. This is a plant you start this June and commit to for the long term. Not because the long term is a long time away. Because what you plant today is support for the person you will be in 5 years. Plant 7. Burdock root. This is the plant most people have spent the most time trying to get rid of. The big, broad leaves. The burrs that attach to everything in fall and require 20 minutes to remove from a dog's coat. The root that goes so deep into the ground it seems to laugh at the shovel. Most gardeners spend years in a low-grade war with burdock. They should be harvesting it instead. Arctium lapa. Greater burdock is a biennial native to Europe and Asia that has naturalized across most of North America. In its first year, it produces a rosette of large, heart-shaped leaves and a deep taproot. In its second year, it sends up a tall, flowering stalk, produces the notorious burrs, sets seed, and dies. The first-year root is the prize. Harvested in fall of year 1 or spring of year 2 before the flowering stalk emerges. When the root is most tender, most flavorful, and most dense with functional compounds. The research on burdock root has examined several mechanisms relevant to cellular protection, blood sugar balance support, and metabolic health. A study published in the International Journal of Molecular Sciences found that burdock root produced significant supportive effects against oxidative stress. Research that supports the long traditional use of burdock as a natural systemic tonic. Additional research has examined burdock's inulin content, a powerful prebiotic fiber that feeds beneficial gut bacteria and supports natural insulin sensitivity. If you do not already have burdock growing in your yard or nearby, and in most of the country you do, purchase seeds from a garden supplier. Direct sow in June in a spot with deep, loose soil. Burdock roots can reach 3 feet and need room to go down without hitting hardpan or rocks. A raised bed built deep or a raised row of loosened soil makes harvest dramatically easier. Space seeds 12 inches apart and cover lightly. They germinate within 10 to 14 days in warm soil. Burdock is vigorous. Once planted, it will not need your help. In fall of the first year, when the plant is a rosette of large leaves and has not yet sent up a flower stalk, loosen the soil deeply around each plant with a garden fork and pull the roots slowly and carefully. First-year burdock roots are typically 12 to 18 inches long, tan on the outside, and white on the inside, with a mildly earthy, slightly sweet flavor. Scrub them thoroughly. Do not peel, the skin carries much of the nutritional value. Slice thin and sauté with sesame oil and soy sauce in the traditional preparation called kimpira gobo, which has been eaten as a daily health food for centuries. Add sliced burdock root to soups and stews where it softens beautifully and adds an earthy depth. Dry sliced pieces for tea, 1 tablespoon simmered in 2 cups of water for 20 minutes, strained, and drunk daily. The weed that has been fighting you for space in your yard has been trying to provide you with deep nutrition the whole time. That is either one of the funniest or one of the most humbling things a garden has ever done. There is a reason this channel keeps coming back to June. Not because it is the only month you can plant, because it is the month when the gap between knowing and doing closes the fastest. The soil is perfectly warm. The days are long. The growing window that peaks in June is the window in which plants establish most efficiently, when root systems develop the depth and resilience that determine how well everything performs for the rest of the season, and for every season after that. These 7 plants are not for this summer alone. Moringa builds a root system that will make it larger and more productive next year. Ginger divides underground and gives you more rhizome than you started with. Oregano and thyme spread and fill space and improve with age. Sage grows into a larger, more productive shrub every year it stays in the ground. Astragalus is a multi-year investment that compounds. Burdock self-seeds and returns without replanting. You are not planting a garden for this season alone. You are planting one that gets more useful, more productive, and more functional every single year you leave it in the ground. If this video gave you even one plant you are putting in the ground this June, subscribe right now, because next week we go just as deep into a different corner of the same garden. Every week, this channel brings you the natural knowledge that belongs in your hands, rooted in real plants, real research, and the kind of wisdom that has been growing quietly for longer than any of us have been paying attention. Hit subscribe and drop one comment before you go. Tell me which of these 7 plants surprised you most. Tell me your zone or your state. I read every single one, and your answers shape what comes next. The garden is not finished with you yet. Go see what it is growing.